Welcome to the Asian Adoptee Experience through doll making. Note, not all Asian adoptees have the exact same experience.
Nicolette, Lacey. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Grace. My pronouns are they, them.
So I'm Lindsay Garrissey, pronouns she, her.
So my first question is, what does adoption mean to you?
When I think of adoption, I think of just people who have so much love to give and just bringing people together, regardless of origin or race, ethnicity. In the end, I really just think it is about love and connection.
There's also all those losses for like transnational, international adoption. Not only like your birth family, but like your birth language, birth culture.
Adoption is definitely complicated.
Do you identify yourself as Asian American or just American?
Definitely Asian American, specifically from the Philippines. And I always grew up saying Asian Pacific Islander. I grew up in Japan, in Okinawa. So I think that Asian part is really important.
Yes, I'm ethnically Chinese, but like culturally, my mom is like Portuguese and Greek American, and my dad's like Norwegian and Swedish. I think it's hard for me to identify as like Asian American just because like even though like as adoptees we are Asian Americans, I just feel so displaced from the Asian American people that I have grown up with and known because a lot of them were like refugee populations who only spoke the language. They all took ESL classes, you know, they were very separate from me and like my sister who's also an adoptee.
That's still something that I struggle with, especially on like placement exams and stuff when they ask for your ethnicity and Asian's like the only box. I think a lot of insecurities pop up only when I'm around other people who seem like who have a richer Asian background than I do, because I do say I'm Chinese American, but I feel like that's physically just only on the outside for me because I always want to know more, but it's definitely different growing up in America with American parents and American relatives.
Yeah, I think a lot of adoptees can relate to feeling confused about identity. When you are adopted, even if you had a good adoption experience, you still lost a whole culture and a family. And so there's a lot of grief. Joy is important to remember. I think adoptees sometimes have to work a bit harder to find that.
How do you feel about not knowing your language from where you were born?
It just like to become fluent in a totally different language is just so hard. But I feel like it's tough sometimes when older Asian folks will talk to me and it's harder to understand them, or they're just speaking like fully in Mandarin and I'm like, I'm so sorry, like I can't speak back to you.
That's hard. And coincidentally, I do know my birth family. I've been in touch with them for a while. And I'm trying to learn Tagalog, but it's hard when you don't have people to practice with.
Do you celebrate the day you were adopted? And if so, what do you call it?
I think in my family, we call it Adoption and Citizenship Day.
And so does my family. We still call it Gotcha Day. We don't have any pets, so it doesn't conflict in that way. But it's also a celebration for my mom because she did adopt me on Mother's Day. So it's kind of a day for both of us.
We just call it Family Day because like that's like the day that we all became a family. And then like me and my sister each have like our own ones like on the days of our adoption.
Can you share some examples of what shouldn't be said to adoptees?
Oh, you're not really Asian. That's a big one for me just because like I've been told that by like Asians from Asia, Asian Americans who have like Asian families, but like if you see me on the street, I still am phenotypically Asian. Like I'll still be discriminated the same way. Like I've gotten some weird comments just like about being adopted, not being like an Asian adoptee specifically, but like, do you know like your real parents? For me, it doesn't like bother me personally too much. Like I'm not like gonna be really like go home and cry like, oh no, like.
Yeah, I think one time when I was in grade school, somebody asked if I'm able to write to my birth parents. I know that was just out of curiosity, so I didn't like take it in a bad way. I was like, oh no, I don't know who they are. Depending on like what age you were adopted, but I feel like most adoptees that I've met were adopted at a pretty young age. So to be asked like, oh, like, why were you adopted? Or like, why did your parents leave you? Like, I have no idea like the answer to those questions. I'm probably never gonna know. So
I'm also in a like closed adoption, like Chinese adoption, but I think it's different for like other adoptees too, because like I mentioned, I knew some other adoptees back in South Dakota, and they were Vietnamese adoptees, but they actually did know their birth parents, and like because it's like a different country, and but they had like the names of their birth parents on their documents, you know, versus like a lot of like Korean adoptees or Chinese adoptees, like based on like social or like governmental policies, like it wasn't allowed. Yes, it definitely does come from like a place of like too much curiosity and ignorance for like strangers, but two, like they might know of some other like adoptee who does know. So that probably is why they're like, oh yeah, so you probably know, or they know like about domestic adoptees who probably have more open adoptions. But like, especially for Chinese adoptees, it's so, I don't know, anonymous.
What comes to mind when you think of injustice against the AAPI community?
There's been like ongoing hate crimes, especially directed at like elderly people or like women, like vulnerable populations. I think the things that break to the news are the physical like violence, like what happened in Atlanta. But a lot of it, when you say like my feelings on it or like my perception of it, a lot of it is based on like perpetuated stereotypes and like orientalizing views of like Asian people, Asian women, and Vietnam, Korea. So a lot of like orientalizing and fetishizing of Asian women happened because of those soldiers going there and like abusing those women. Later, with further enforced immigration, a lot of Asians coming in from like East Asia, South Asia had to be highly skilled workers, creating like model minority myths. So then the only people who could come were the highly educated, the highly skilled workers in the medicine and STEM industries. So that gave other like views that Asians are only fitting into this one category. It's just like a very troubled history with specific case by case, like, oh, this is the type of people Asians are. This is the type of people Asians are. This is the type of people Asians are.
So when I think about AAPI hate and this particular rise in violence currently, it's all rooted in the same thing, which is white supremacy, which happens worldwide. And in the United States, there's a specific history of colonialism and imperialism that fuel that hatred. It's like built in, similar to anti-Blackness, racism broadly. It's like built into the culture. It's scary to know that we don't know which white people out there are gonna have a bad day and want to do something harmful. But it's when we can remember that there have been generations and decades and legacies of anti-oppression movement and activism that has pushed back against white supremacy for a long time. That gives me hope, because we can continue to organize and rally together, especially if we can do it across race and class. Then we really can, if we remember that white supremacy is the biggest and the enemy, there's a lot we can do. Creativity is really what's going to save us. Literally dreaming up new worlds and new possibilities.
What advice would you give to empower adoptees?
Just from an adoptee perspective, just like letting adoptees know that it's okay to feel confused about your identity. I think that that's just a step in the process of trying to figure it out. And don't compare yourselves to other people who seem like more Asian than you. And I think there's so much diversity within like the adoptee label in the Asian American label that you don't have to like try to fit into something that you feel doesn't apply to you. We're all beautiful and we all have our own stories.
Add to that, like, yeah, I definitely think even the adoptee experience isn't a monolith. And like for any adoptees out there, like you'll always have like a community. Everyone has like different experiences and you don't have to like agree with everything every adoptee says.
I would say that their life is their choice. Adoption maybe was not our choice. Moving forward, we still get to create the type of life that we want to live. Even though it feels like a lot was taken away from us, we still have a lot of choice.
My name's Nicolette Lacey. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Grace, to my pronouns are they, them.
So I'm Lindsay Garrissey, pronouns she, her.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something about adoption, and I hope specifically you learned something about Asian adoptees. Any adoptees watching this video, I hope you realize that your experience is valid and that you're not alone. So, thank you. Bye.